Hello, hi, it's Professor JPS, and this is a lecture, a streamlined lecture for Communication Arts 257. Um, Focus on the director. I'm sorry, American Film Heritage. Sorry, American Film Heritage, and this is a lecture for this week's film MASH and a carryover from 2 weeks ago, finishing up aspects of the film American Graffiti. Okay. So, first things first, welcome back. I hope everyone's staying safe. And really make sure that you're practicing social distancing and staying at home as much as possible. Young guys, do not mess around with this. Really, it takes all of us to do this. Anyway, also be sure to be looking at your NCC email. Okay? If you have not yet found any of the emails that I have sent to you, it's because the master class list lists mainly your NCC email. Okay? So please, it's very, very important that you find your NCC email so we can stay in touch. I think there's a way to link your personal email to your NCC email through Outlook. So I know some students have done that, so make sure you do that. It's very, very important. So I want to discuss some aspects of American Graffiti from 2 weeks ago. First, let's do mise en scène, or elements of filmmaking. And I think the best way to do these lectures is for you to listen to what I'm saying, and when I start to list things, you hit pause on YouTube, write them down, then hit play. Okay, so here goes. In terms of American Graffiti, in terms of the elements of mise en scène, a couple of important ones. One, the film is shot with relatively low-key lighting. Low-key lighting, which means it's relatively dark. Since the film takes place all in one day and much of it is in the evening, George Lucas wanted to give the film a realistic look. So he doesn't use that much artificial or movie lighting, big fat movie lighting. He tried to make it look pretty real for the time period in 1962, and they shoot the film on location, okay? Which means they shot the entire film in Marin County, Northern California, in that small town. And much of the film is shot at night, so it's reflective of the evening. So it's supposed to evoke this sense of something was really happening 10 years in the past from when the film was made. So it has low-key lighting, and it's shot on location. Okay? The low-key lighting means that it's relatively dark. Another aspect of mise en scène that's important to the film is that it has what's called an episodic plot. Episodic plot, which means that it has no one real strong storyline and no one real strong protagonist. I guess you could make the argument that Richard Dreyfuss is the key protagonist, but he's no more important than the collection of people representing that small town in that innocent time prior to the difficulties of the Vietnam War and the strife of the 1960s. Okay? The plot is filled with a bunch of different episodes for those particular characters. One person that we're getting behind. Idea used in the film. Another aspect of the film that I think is good in terms of the notions of mise en scène is there's some use of handheld camera. Sometimes when they have showing people at the dances, and sometimes by that soda shop and the hamburger joint, sometimes there's handheld camera to give it a kind of what they used to call shaky camera realism. The sense that the camera was sort of permeating the real space around them. It didn't feel like a standard soundstage Hollywood film at the time. It felt like a pretty realistic depiction of the not too distant past in California/America. So it has low-key lighting, some handheld camera, episodic plot, and no one strong protagonist. It's supposed to represent the group. and it is shot on location. The entire thing is shot on location. So that all of those elements of Sen is an attempt to evoke realism, okay? A realistic depiction of something that happened in the past. But the key element to mise en scène is the music. As we discussed prior to seeing the film, right before spring break and then the ultimate shutdown of NCC, is that the music is instrumental and ubiquitous. The music punctuates every scene in the film. The film has 40 scenes to it, and each scene has a song that opens the film. And we talked about this idea of diegesis, Diegesis, diegesis. Diegesis is the world of the narrative or the world of the film. And if you hear music in a film, most of the time the music is non-diegetic. It's for the audience, like the strings on a violin in Psycho or Jaws. The people on the beach in Jaws do not hear that music, right? There's no diegetic music in Jaws that way. But in this film, there's kind of an excuse. There's kind of like this supporting character. It's the popular radio station that all the teenagers listen to in all of their cars. So each time there's a justification for that song to be within the realm of the film, within the diegetic world. And then Lucas kind of turns up the volume for the audience to hear all of those old-timey late 50s and early 60s rock and roll songs. It's almost as if the music character in the film. And the music is very well played. Sometimes it's even too on the nose, really telling the audience what the scene is supposed to mean. But it does a very good job of placing a connection between the song and the characters and the narrative. But importantly, diegetically, it's within the story. It's in the environment the characters are actually reacting in. That's what gives it its difference. That's what gives it its originality. So the music is used very, very well to not only punctuate scenes and give them a kind of shape and a form, but it's also there to remind 1973 audiences of the nostalgic time before the difficulties of the 1960s, before Vietnam, before the onset and ultimate shaming that would occur in America with the civil rights movement, when the vast amount of white Americans who saw for themselves the horror and shame of the segregation and the struggle and civil rights on television every night, before the really heavy use of the birth control pill and the sexual revolution, and before boys started wearing long hair and people starting having premarital sex, all of this stuff is, by 1973, has all of the strives of this and difficulties of the 60s had been lived through. And Lucas is the one filmmaker who, among all the filmmakers we're looking at this semester, he's going back to his late teenage years to remember a time of nostalgia. And that's a kind of almost a bold move in an era when all of the other sort of hippie filmmakers are actually making films that are trying to talk about the changes in American life, the difficulties of American life. Coppola and Scorsese, and even to some degree Spielberg and Arthur Penn and Stanley Kubrick, and John Cassavetes, and a bunch of other filmmakers, they're about the immediate moment of that particular time period. And even if it's placed in a different time period, they bring the 60s ideas with them. But Lucas doesn't do that. Lucas, in almost a very original stroke for him, he goes and reminds the rabble-rousers, the rebels, the 60s generation, remember when things were very simple? Remember when the biggest problem you had was a date one Saturday night? Remember when you didn't have all these responsibilities and the difficulty of the world? And because he just caught the audience at the right moment, this film was a very, very big hit. And it set in motion a whole 2 generations worth of nostalgia that America has ever since been interested in. I mean, why is there a 50s diner on the Post Road? There's not a 30s diner or a 90s diner, right? Grease and Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and so many other 50 themed kind of ideas seemed to situate a kind of perfect time in American life. And it certainly wasn't perfect, but that was a very, very powerful film that set it off. And the music was really, really important because it was diegetic and semi-diegetic at the same time. Okay? Because it was in the environment of the film. Okay? So that's part 1 of today's lesson. This is March 23rd, Monday, but I'm doing it a day early for tomorrow's class. It should be ready, be ready for tomorrow's class. Okay? Part 1, part 2 about the film MASH will come up next. Thank you.